Okay, so you're going to be totally shocked that Bryan and I are huge fans of the power of employer branding. I know. Duh. Who's shocked? Stunning. Everybody, get the defibrillators. What are you going to do? Look, it's not about, when you get down to it, it's not about making your career site look a certain way or look cool or making your LinkedIn posts all standardized in a certain way. Employer brand is strategy. At its heart, it is strategy, which is why we care about it so much. It is how you present your company so that people go, ooh, 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 I want some of that, please, instead of you begging at Oliver style, please, sir, can I have some applications? Because it isn't a tool, you have to kind of sell it a specific way. It's not something you can easily, tangibly see, right? You can't say, I'd like you can't ask your neighbor for a cup of employer branding. It's a whole different ballgame. You kind of have to sell it as a strategy, which is abstract and fuzzy and hard to explain. And so selling it matters. So remember, our goal here is to help you get your seat at the table. And what we're trying to do is help you engage and convince your boss that this stuff matters, that this stuff is important, even if it is hard to sometimes explain and define and point to and show. If you can get them to have them take you seriously on this subject, it goes a long way for having them take you seriously on other subjects. This is a great kind of either a canary in the coal mine or a litmus test or whatever you want to call it. This is a great opportunity for you to show how strategic your thinking is. That is why we're talking about how to talk to your boss about employer branding.
What's the biggest trick to getting leadership to invest in your employer brand? And what does it have to do with vegetables? I guess you'll just have to keep watching. Welcome to the People MBA, helping talent leaders get their seat at the table. This episode is being brought to you by the Muse. You've reached the People MBA. We're out shopping for our new global headquarters, so go ahead and talk after the beep.
Hi guys, Lucas Bosco from Team Brazil here. I've been wondering, how can you really get leadership excited about branding? Like fully on board with it. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
All right. Well, this episode should be a special one, really, James. No pressure at all. But obviously, we've both got a lot to say about this. But I'm excited to sort of flip the roles today. Me being the interviewer and you being the sort of the expert guest. Actually, if you like. So, employer branding, obviously, something that you and I both care deeply about. And I think today's conversation highlights just how much it matters. When we get it right, it builds trust, attracts the right talent, and drives meaningful outcomes for organizations. But we've both seen how easy it is to miss the mark, and the cost can be enormous. So I'm excited to dive in specifically from your point of view to get your expertise, which I may challenge at some point.
You know what? I'm banking on that. I am to the audience, Bryan and I have kind of said, gosh, we agree, Will, on a lot of stuff here. We're not really creating friction. I knew this would be the one where we go. We care about it so much and we come from different perspectives. I guarantee there will be some, maybe not shots fired, but certainly a little bit of disagreement, which should be fun.
Yeah, I hope so. But you bring such a fresh, no-nonsense perspective to the table, and I know our audience. Well, yeah, there's that, and you've got so much array of different experiences and different organisations of different sizes and all the rest of it. I want to make sure that we draw that out today, and the audience and TA leaders walk away with some actionable insights that they can use immediately. So.
And speaking of actionable insights, Bryan, there's a download with this episode because there always is. So this week's episode, we have the download brought to you by the Muse. Check out People MBA to go download it. If you're subscribed, it's free. And if you're not subscribed, go subscribe. That's also free. So go check out People MBA to get the full download on how to talk to your boss about employer branding.
Nice segue there, James.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so let's dig into the opportunities and the pitfalls of employer branding and uncover what it takes to truly succeed in the space. So we'll kick off. Before we jump directly in, obvious question to start with, but why is it so important to get this internal conversation right?
Couple of layers to this. The first is it is abstract and it is complicated. It's not like saying I'm going to buy a CRM. Everybody knows what a CRM. You can point to a CRM. You can show the volume of emails you sent and the number of applications you've gotten. It's got real obvious kind of metrics associated with it. Comes out of the box ready to go. That is an easy thing to sell. selling strategy, as any consultant will tell you, is difficult. You're selling a kind of, it's hard. It's a mixture of selling expertise. It's a mixture of selling outcomes. It's a mixture of selling perspective. It is very, very messy and sloppy. If you walk up to your boss and say, I want employer brand, you've got a lot of problems, as I imagine we'll talk about, in terms of what people assume employer branding is and what the baggage leaders bring along with this idea. About 5 years ago, Harvard Business Review did a cover story on employer brand, which to this day, I still feel lingers and taints leadership's understanding of what employer brand is. If I could go back in time and nix that article, it would make our lives so much better. People just don't have the right sense of understanding. So you have to walk in with armed, not to the teeth, but certainly for the conversation. The conversation will be expensive, what you're asking for. It's going to require lots of stakeholders. It's going to require some level of executive buy-in on some level. It's going to require a lot of moving pieces. And so you're not just asking for a tool, you plug it and play. You are asking the company to make change on change on change at a variety of different places. And that is not something that is easily done.
So in my experience as well, it's a sort of delicate dance of pretending like you're not educating them whilst educating them. So
that is valid.
Yeah, I think in many organizations as well, it's not a new tangible thing that you're bringing. It's something that has the potential to improve existing tangible things. So getting it right obviously determines the value and the career trajectory of the person positioning it, actually, because if you're not taken seriously and it's not seen as valuable and it's not positioned strategically, it's a fork in the road that you don't want to get wrong, right?
Yeah.
So
because
what
there's
is
a price tag? There's a price tag. And if you get saddled with, oh, wow, we spent thousands of dollars and this thing went nowhere, that's on your hip. You will be carrying that like an albatross around your neck for the next year or two. So you can't afford to mess that up.
Is that the biggest danger when you're talking about brand to leadership?
I don't know. There's so many dangers involved. There's so many pitfalls. It is... just a quick list. Leadership decides that employer brand equals leadership personal brand and just decides it's whatever makes the leadership look good. I've seen that a lot. I've seen it where too many cooks in the kitchen and everything gets so watered down that you kind of go, why bother? Why did we even spend this kind of money to become a brand that says nothing? I've seen it where it does fail because it's improperly executed and activated, and I always joke, it's a really expensive deck that can collect dust. It really is. And all too often, that's exactly what happens. There's so many ways to kind of get this wrong. And in the end, as the talent acquisition leader who is bringing this idea to the table, you are placing a bet within the company that we should invest in this thing, and that outcome rides on you. Just like if a sales leader said, hey, we should invest in X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't work out, that lands on the sales leader. And if you look at failed products, you can see the product manager and the executives who kind of champion those projects. There's a wake of bodies in bad products kind of failing to launch. So it is dangerous.
I mean, that makes me think of, I've seen a number of times very successful, effective ways of positioning employer brand to get initial buy-in and sign-off that actually don't pay dividends at the end. Like positioning it wrong, it's effectively getting the budget you need to do the work, but at the end you haven't got the buy-in and the understanding and the right expectations such that the leadership has the patience to see momentum build over time and so on and so forth. So how do you balance the effectiveness of getting initial buy-in, but also setting expectations appropriately such that you've got the continued buy-in and patience to let employer brand sustainably make a difference over time?
Yeah, and that is a real danger. I will not name names, but I will tell stories. At least twice, I have been hired in-house full-time to build an employer brand by the head of TA, and the CEO, the CFO, the CHRO kind of sort of went, if you say so. Like they had no buy-in whatsoever. And I walked in going, I can't wait to do some great work, not realizing nobody wanted me there. I was a pet project of the TA leader, and everybody treated me as such. I couldn't get meetings. I couldn't get involvement. I couldn't get people to show up to the conversation, and I was doomed. I was doomed to failure on so many levels, and you had 2 and 3 times as much work to kind of get things moving. The way you change that conversation, the way you change this idea of, okay, I'll give you the initial buy-in, but I will hold my skepticism until after I see it, which is kind of what we're talking about here, is you talk about employer brand not as a good thing, not as this idea, not as a deck, not as a couple. I always joke, most employer brands, leaders think it's a couple of magic words. Hey, just say these 5 words and say them over and over again, and that's our brand. You're like, oh boy. What you're really doing is solving a business problem. Oh, for the love of all things employer branding, write that on the tattoo on the inside of your eyeballs. It's there to solve a problem. And if you couch the need for employer brand as a, hey, we need to solve this problem. We've tried this, we've tried this, we've tried this. They aren't working. What we need is a strategic approach to change everything in this way. Here are some outcomes. Here are some long-term outcomes. And by the way, you'll notice I have 2 different sets of outcomes, not just long-term. And everybody thinks employer brand is so long-term. It's not. But if you say we're solving this problem, there will be knock-on positive effects, but ultimately you should measure the value of what we're doing and the outcome of this project on this problem alone. Keep it focused. If you try to solve, hey, the dozens of positive outcomes that employer brand will likely bring, there's a Russian proverb, the dog that chases 2 rabbits catches none. You have to focus on a single problem that's the most important. It's the most expensive problem. Show the value. That makes ROI calculations so much easier down the road. But ultimately, it's about, we're doing this not because it's idea of the month, or it's because it's fashionable, or because someone else said we should. We're doing it to solve a business problem, not a recruiting problem, a business problem. And if you couch it that way, there are layers and layers of positive outcomes, including you look as the TA leader like someone who is there to solve business problems, which is always good for you.
That is definitely always good for you, but there's usually more than one business priority. So first of all, how do you choose the business priority to hang your hat on? And second of all, which is a little bit more nuanced, in order to deliver that success and be true to your promise and hang everything on that, you and I both know that there are dependencies that require the change in attitude, behavior, buy-in, collaboration, all of those things of other peers around you. Sometimes, more often than not, they're more senior than you as well. So, so the odds are stacked against you if you don't set this off in the right way. So how do you make sure that those dependencies don't become major risks? And how do you know that you focused on the right priorities in the first place?
Yeah, I want to do the first one first. The priorities is tough, and you need to ask. You can't decide what you think the most important problem is. Now, as someone who's bringing this to the table, we're presuming you understand how employer brand works. We're presuming you understand how employer brand can change that value. It's a lot to put on your shoulders. It's really tough to kind of be the expert in that space as you're talking to the CFO and the CHRO and everybody else in between to get them excited. You should be involving whoever is the expert in employer branding in those conversations. You should be doing a kind of unpacking, a kind of investigation of, okay, of the 5 positive outcomes to the company this employer brand should likely bring, what is the most important? What's the value to each one? What is the timeline for those values? What is the likelihood of those things occurring? Is this will influence that change, or this will directly make that change? All that stuff has to kind of go into a bigger, I won't call it a matrix, I won't call it a spreadsheet, I will just simply call, you have to look at the bigger picture and say, look, there are plenty of times in which the problem that is easiest to solve is the way to go, because you can create a short-term win, hang your hat on that, create a toehold in what's going on and say, okay. And then phase 2 is you make this bigger win, and you can actually break it up into pieces. So you're solving multiple problems, but you're doing it one at a time so that everybody feels like, I feel happy because I know that I'm being served at some point. You might simply say, let's just focus on one problem, and that's the only problem we're going to focus on. But you need to hear from leaders that that's okay, that makes sense, because every choice you make thrills one leader and kind of pisses off another one, right? You're playing favorites.
Yeah.
So in terms of kind of, I'm like, ask me questions.
So I just want to jump in there because You choose one metric. Presumably, it's one that is really, really important to the organization, and it's a priority one. In my experience, it's important and worthy, and it could have a big impact on the organization. So now the stakes are higher. You have to deliver on that. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that metric, whatever it is usually not the metric that leadership will get excited about. So in my experience, you need a big, meaty, worthy, impactful goal, but also there needs to be a sprinkling of an ego metric as well, like a Glassdoor rating moving, or you're going to be featured more in these articles and all the rest of it. So, like, what do you think about that?
But you got to keep that primary metric at heart. You have to say, look, this is the first. And look, we've all seen the the racy kind of charts, like who's responsible, who's accountable, who all that stuff. You can do the same thing for your metrics. You can say this is the primary, everything rests on this metric, and then you have secondary outcomes that you should also be measuring and should also be talking about. And some of them will go up, and some of them will go down. And be like, okay, but on the mean, we are moving them in the right direction. But ultimately, you have to over-index on one. Otherwise, you're splitting your focus, and you're going to get yourself in trouble. Because in the end, a opportunity will arise that will serve one of the secondary outcomes and not so much serve one of the primary. And when you move the needle, when you change your direction, you're putting yourself in danger. You have to be purely focused on that core and say, if we do this right, there are positive outcomes, but until we solve for X, we cannot move on to Y.
But in my experience, leaders get excited and love employer brand strategy based on all of the ego metrics. And then they justify reinvesting based on the impact you've made from a business perspective. So I think getting that balance right and maintaining high energy and buy-in and ambassadorship, you've got to be delivering that stuff that's sexy and interesting and self-serving and all of those things.
So for example, let's say your business decides our most important metric that we need to change is our quality of talent. And of course, if you find a way to measure quality of talent, good for you, do that. It is something of a holy grail in terms of how to really measure that. Everybody does a little differently. But if you say, look, if we do this work, our Glassdoor score will likely float up. And if that's what you sell leadership is kind of like, hey, here's the cherry on top of the sundae, that's fine. So long as you don't take away too much focus on how do we say the stuff we need to say that attracts the right kind of talent and pushes the wrong kind of talent away, and say, because look, if you want to float your Glassdoor score up, we all know there are some nice little tricks that will just, even without the employer brand, will generally float the number up a little bit, right? There are ways of goosing that number a bit. So long as it's not taking too much attention from what you're really trying to solve, because ultimately saying you went from a 3.9 to a 4.1, that's great. Show me the dollar value to that. Oh, wait. Oh, no, you can't. I don't think you could. But if you start to show me quality of talent is changing and on a metric that matters, HR comes in right behind you and say, let me show you the impact to the business, because that's their job. So you're absolutely right. I think we're just kind of beating a dead horse here that it is a balancing act. But I tend, and maybe this is a function of me working primarily with smaller companies, I tend to focus on one metric at a time, because you can't solve for 6 things at a time. Okay, and to put that metric in context, how important is it to benchmark against competitors or something tangible to demonstrate? Yeah, that's an it depends answer. Every company is a little different. I think companies who are the most mature in understanding how people choose don't have to worry too much about saying we are just as good as Amazon or Google or OpenAI or whatever. I think they understand that we should stand alone, right? No one says, oh, they don't have Coke, I'll just buy Pepsi instead, right? They're the same thing almost, but in the end, you have a clear choice. It doesn't matter what Pepsi's doing, Coke's going to do Coke's thing, and vice versa. And that's an ecosystem where both audiences, both companies are collecting what they need. They're in competition, but they've positioned themselves such that they really aren't. And that's ultimately the goal. For companies who aren't as mature in that thinking, where they're just like, we just have to beat that company, or the recruiters are so terrified of company X, Y, or Z, do it. If that gets you the toeholds you need to get everybody excited, do it, right? Just it's a game of don't overpromise that we're going to crush that other company if that's not really the goal. If you use it to kind of get people excited, that's fine. Because that's the thing about employer brand. It is has so many outcomes. You can talk to different audiences about different parts of the beast, right? Different parts of the elephant. So you can talk to recruiters and say, look, I know Facebook keeps you up at night. I get that. If we implement this properly, Facebook will become less of a concern for you. Is that what you sold to leadership? No, they don't care about that. They don't care about that at all. But if that's what gets leaders or gets recruiters excited, do that. And so there's a lot of kind of tools you can use to get those audiences super pumped.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because, obviously the conversation starts to diverge towards the business case and demonstrating a return on investment. Now, we've covered a bit of this when we talked about how to speak to a CFO from a numbers and a metrics perspective and all the rest of it.
And all that's valid. You should definitely listen to that and go check that out.
And check the download out, and build your own business case and all of that good stuff. But when we're specifically talking about employer brand strategy, I think it's important to really demonstrate the impact. So not the dollar amount that's changed, but the impact of changing that dollar amount. Yes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do you approach that, and how do you do that in a universal story approach so the penny will drop whoever's in the room?
There's a lot of different ways to do that. I tend to believe that you can tell macro stories in the micro. And so, for example, you're a biotech company and you're fighting for biochemists like hand over fist, like everybody else, not enough. There's all this money flooding into the biotech space. They're trying to hire all these biochemists all the time. How do you pick? How do you get the right ones? It's a fight. All the career sites look the same. All the job postings look the same, yada, yada, yada. So I think if you say, rather than say, here's how the industry is changing, that's a big macro conversation. It's hard as the tiny little TA leader who, maybe business doesn't quite take as seriously as they should. If you simply say, here is a role that you leader are very, very concerned about. This is a mission critical role. This is the director of product management. This is the head of medical. This is whatever this going to change the stock price kind of hire is going to be. I bet you would love a Nobel quality, Fields Medal level quality candidate for this role. Someone you could write a press release about, someone you could announce to, someone who will have an impact, not just on the company, but on the stock price. Yes, we want that very much. Thank you very much. Make that happen. Okay. That person exists out there. We know their email address. We know where they work. We know where they live. We know everything about them. Until we solve for the problem that they don't know about us and don't understand why they should change, no amount of outreach will have them respond. They simply aren't interested. We look like everybody else. We sound like everybody else, and everybody is easy to ignore. And then the leaders go, oh, that's a problem. Yes, that is a problem. So thank you for noticing that. What we'd like to do is to plant a flag about how we're different, what we offer, what our reward is, what our mission is, what our work experience, whatever that thing is. Talk about it so that we can surround them with interesting messages so that when our recruiters say, hey, we'd like to talk to you, they have positive feelings about us already, which is going to make them more likely to open the email, to respond to the email, to respond to the phone call. We can't reach the people you want to reach using the same tools everybody else is. And when you get to that line, leaders kind of have a moment and they kind of go, that makes sense. And that's when you have them. So to me, if you can say, we're solving for that problem, they go, that sounds great. But the nice part is if you solve for that problem, you solve for all these other problems that are happening every single day, not just once every year hire, but every single hire. We can reach better quality talent. We can close candidates faster. We can get more yeses, whatever that is. Start with a easy, tangible, obvious to see story. If it's someone they are actually actively hiring and they're complaining that we can't get candidates, you're in. That is like fertile ground for you to have that story.
So let's just take a beat there for a second because I agree that's your opportunity to be relevant and be the valuable sort of stakeholder, the problem solver.
Yep.
At that moment, do you use your 15 minutes of fame to try and educate them about employer brand, or do you just use it to say, I need some budget to tell some stories, to make us more relevant, to make us more compelling, to get you what you need, and then shut up and wait for the budget and go and do it?
Yeah. I think the longer you can go without ever saying the phrase employer brand, or even worse, EVP, the better off you are. You are building a talent strategy. You are building a narrative strategy. You are increasing brand recognition. You are doing, and these are all terms that they understand. Leaderships get what that strategy is and what brand recognition is and all that stuff. Do they know what employer brand is? Maybe. Maybe not. And even if they think they do, they're probably wrong. So anything that avoids that conversation is good for you. Besides, you're not selling a product, you're selling an outcome. And the outcome is we will attract the people you actually want to hire. And on a certain level, you almost in the back of your head say, you don't actually care how I do this. Just give me the money to let me solve this problem. And then down the road, you get to say, this is a bit of an employer brand project.
Okay. So, I mean, that's interesting because actually we're trying to elevate the importance of employer brand. But what you just said there is if you can get away with not bringing it up at all,
leadership.
But if that's the case, we've got no chance of getting employer brand and employer brand strategy into the primary vernacular of business strategy.
Yeah, I know. I am kind of making a short-term win and a long-term loss. I am making our jobs a little harder, but
unless you deliver the value first and then you educate them how afterwards, right?
There it is. Yeah.
If you're enjoying this conversation, subscribe to The People MBA, either on YouTube or your podcast player. All downloads are available at peoplemba.com. These gents are here to raise the visibility and value of our entire industry. So if you got something out of it, tell a friend or a stranger who might become a friend.
You know, it's kind of like, remember 10, 15 years ago, buying a cell phone, really more, iPhones, right?
Mm.
Our camera has X number of megapixels now. And most people went, that's just gobbledygook. I don't understand that. But they would say, more pictures, better pictures, and they would show you the pictures. You were buying better pictures. You didn't care that the answer was bigger sensor, more megapixels, whatever the hell the thing in the background. It's the same thing. You're selling the outcome. And then as you kind of say, oh, I like these cameras, if they're excited about what those cameras can do, you can educate them and say, yes, it's because we have a bigger sensor and it has more megapixels, that sort of thing. It's the same kind of idea. Sell the outcome and then come around the back end and say, hey, it's because we did this. This worked. Now let's continue the investment. Let's continue getting buy-in. Let's continue getting activation and all that stuff. I keep using the word toehold for a reason, because you can't sell to a company that doesn't understand it all the employer brand at once. You have to sell them the pilot. You have to then sell them the project. You then have to sell them the process. Then you have to sell them the change in perspective. And now everybody, it ladders up. You can't start by eating the whole elephant at once.
Okay, so I will see your answer and I will raise you this. I don't think leaders particularly care about talent unless they are the award-winning, famous person.
I thought I was going to be the salty, starky, cynical one here. You own that.
I honestly, I think when all's said and done, you look at a C-suite, they care about the share price going up, right?
Yeah.
Now, if that means they have to invest in the world's best talent in order to do that, you have my attention. However, if that talent, when they sit in the room with everybody else, can't do their job such that they beat competition, actually, it's just been a really expensive hire now. So my thesis is this. Leaders don't care about talent. They care about the capability you can extract from talent, which means if we're really going to go there, we have to dare to be able to talk about an organization's culture, which leaders think they know better than anybody.
Okay, and the bitter, cynical heart of me has to ask this question. This is just a tangent. What do you think leadership misunderstands more, employer brand or culture?
There's no right answer to that. You're not trapping me with that bear trap. No chance.
So, but we'll call it even, but it's both pretty high, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. No, I think you're 100% right. I think this is where, and I remember 6, 7, 8 years ago when you talked about employer brand, you were kind of talking about a veiled culture thing before culture really became Simon Sinek Says and all the videos and all the stuff. Mm-hmm. And now it's buzzword tastical, right? It's all over the place. And again, nobody knows what it really is and nobody talks about it and defines it very well. I think at the time you were connecting those dots and says your culture is your brand. And I still see people on LinkedIn saying that. And it really is like, I don't want to be LinkedIn employer brand police and say, let me tell you the 7 ways you're wrong. But you're wrong. And that's not what that is. I do think there's a correlation though. I think when I think about, look, and this is me opening up, the curtains and telling how I do things. When I think about employer brand, I think exclusively in what makes you different. And I say, every company's a little bit different. And I always get some pushback. No, our company's pretty boring. I'm like, every company is different. Otherwise, it would not exist. Sorry, it's true.
Yep.
And you are different either in the mission you have, the dent you're making in the universe. And that's true of about 10, maybe 15% of all companies. And then you're different in your work experience, which is your culture, your management culture, your day-to-day experience, how you solve problems, how collaborative you are, how autonomous you are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where culture lives. And if you aren't different in one of those two ways, you probably have to be different in your reward structure, how you pay, how you bonus, how you reward, how you teach, all that stuff. There is a difference for every single company. But culture is so dominant in that work experience space. And it's really hard because people want to point to, and you and I know this, you ask, why do you like working here? Oh, I like the culture. I like the people, blah, blah, blah. Such bullshit answers. And then you try and scratch the surface and get below that and they don't know what to say. They just feel like that's what they're supposed to say. When you bring the culture conversation into it, you are opening up Pandora's box. When you're having that conversation with leadership, not only do they not understand employer brand, they really don't understand culture. And you're having to educate them on two things now, neither of which they want to be educated on, frankly. And you are in for it. This is a quagmire of epic proportions. So whatever you can do to avoid that, if you want to bring culture in, and let's say this is a company that's invested in its culture, they talk about their culture, these places exist. Those places exist and those opportunities exist. But in general, culture is the buzzword, it's the poster, it's the whatever, and be careful kind of, conflating the two.
So in summary, you're saying, don't say the words employer brand, don't say the word culture, but it is important to define the story you want to tell. Now, without going down a rabbit hole of what a story is, when you tell that story, there has to be a current state and there has to be a future state that's different. Yes. So what's your best advice to position the story that is relevant and valuable and high impact without saying employer brand and without saying culture that any leader gives a shit about at the end?
Yeah. And that's the whole game. That is the whole game. So what I do is, first off, my definition of culture is, what are the behaviors that occur when there is neither leadership nor rule to decide otherwise? So how do people behave? What is the behaviors in the organization? Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about behaviors. Let's not use the word culture. Everybody thinks they know what that is, but everybody does know what a behavior is, right? Hey, you're always on time to meetings. That's a behavior. Hey, you always leave your expense reports to the last day of the year. That's a behavior. Hey, whatever it is, there's all sorts of behaviors that happen on all levels of all parts of the company, every team. And if you say, look, would this company be more valuable if people tended to behave like X? For example, they were all more autonomous. They felt more ownership of their choices, ownership of their job, ownership of the direction, ownership of their individual strategy and their outcomes. And a lot of leaders would say, absolutely. And just as many leaders would say, oh God, no, please, no, please, no. Everybody should follow the rules. Everybody should do it the way they're supposed to do it. And there's neither wrong nor right there. It's simply how leadership sees the strategy and how they execute that strategy. If you say, oh, you want more autonomy, well, how do you do that? You can't simply say, hey, be more autonomous. That's not going to work. Because if it did, you just said it a long time ago, and probably you have, and it's not worked. What you need to do is understand that behavior doesn't change with a light switch. It changes because you're introducing the right inputs, meaning you're hiring more autonomous people. If that is the trait that you care about, bring more in. Show them that's what you care about. Reward them for those traits. Everybody around will see, oh, wow, those people are getting promoted and rewarded for that trait, and they will start to adjust. You are changing the behaviors of individuals across every level of the company through hiring.
Okay.
I did all of that without saying culture and employer brand, and because what you then say is, look, right now, what you say to candidates isn't very specifically interesting about autonomy. You're getting people who do like autonomy and people who don't care about autonomy. How does that serve you? So if we get hyper-focused on talking about why we care about autonomy, what autonomy looks like, how we reward autonomy, we're going to attract those people, we're going to hire those people, and that's how we change the direction of the company.
Okay, so look, we're getting right to the nub of this now. And this is about how to talk to leadership to actually resonate and be heard. So what I'm hearing from you is, first of all, you need to be clear on what the business success is and what the leaders actually want, right?
Yes.
That's got to be where you start.
Yes.
And then what we're talking about is, what are the behaviors that we want to keep hold of, maybe dial up? And what are the new behaviors that we want to introduce and work towards
that we want
because, and then we need to be clear on the because. What's the impact of that? More business success, and is it more innovation, more collaboration, more autonomy, more productive, whatever it is.
Whatever it is,
It has to join those dots, and the destination needs to live firmly in the world that the leadership care about, right?
Yeah. It's best if you can do this magic trick. And Bryan, I bet money you have made this magic trick happen a couple times in your life. If you can sense what the leadership cares about, the story they tell themselves about how they lead, the vision they have for the company, the direction, when the Zuckmeister, and I will not use his full name for reasons we all understand right now, when the Zuckmeister says move fast and break things, he's trying to encourage people who are very autonomous or have high tolerances for risk. That is what he's saying. That is what he's tracking, because he thinks if I get more people like me, this company is going to get crazy and we're going to do amazing things. Mm-hmm. There are just as many leaders who say, if I could get more people to just stop being cowboys and come in together and work together and brainstorm and collaborate really, really well, that is where real innovation happens. And innovation is what's going to grow our company. That's a different conversation. Those are two very different directions. And if you can kind of tease out from the leader how they see the company and the direction strategy, surf right into that wave, kind of just bring right in, because you can say, okay, great. How are you going to attract those people? How are you going to make that real? Do you feel like you're as collaborative as you want to be, or is that you're innovative and autonomous and disruptive as you want to be? No, this is how we make that change.
So, okay, well, let's go back to something we talked about earlier, because you said just choose one metric or one priority. And
to be held accountable to. That's at the end of that sentence.
But the utopian destination you've just painted there isn't that. So
yes,
how do you make that simple premise we started with correlate with what you've just said there? What's the tangible line?
Yep. Let's draw the line. So if you're this company, and I'm pointing to this company as the collaborative company, not the disruptive company, for those of you who can see us on video, and by the way, you should subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're talking about smooth as silk, it's like I practiced it in front of a mirror. I did not. I say, you're talking to this leader who wants to be more collaborative, because collaborative is how you create innovation. You cannot make that whole leap all at once. You simply can't. It's too big a leap, and you are one person or one function, whatever.
And it's intangible when you're trying to prove a business case.
Yes. What you're going to say is, look, here are the milestones for this idea. First thing we're going to do is make sure that everything we say from a recruiting and comms point of view reflects that idea of collaboration becomes innovation. It's every LinkedIn post, it's every job posting, it's every career site, it's every outreach, it's every bit. I want to get social media and the comms team in to kind of buy into this idea. So every time they talk about something that involves employees, they should be referencing the idea of collaboration becomes innovation. If we do that, the next thing you will see is a change in who comes into the business. You will start to see anecdotally, my favorite word in this example, from hiring managers, that they're getting more of these people you want. They're seeing more of those candidates. They're hiring more of those candidates. Over time, as we bring those people in, you will start to feel, second favorite word, feel the change in how the company operates. You might even say you're going to start to feel a change in culture. That is kind of how you parse this out and say, I know.
You said the C word.
But by then, they're going to get it. By then, they will see the piece to it. That's how you kind of parse that. If you have a couple of other milestones you can throw in there, that's fine. But you have to, what I always say is, when I worked at the agency and I ran a big team of people who was building social media for all these companies, the challenge was always, if you're talking to Target and you say, you should talk about these things on social media, you're getting nowhere. If you say, here is the next 7 weeks of conversation around these 3 core ideas, suddenly you sound like you know what you're talking about. You're not just saying stuff willy-nilly. You're not just asking for stuff like the person's Santa Claus and you want a new pony. You are saying, to achieve the goals you want, these are the steps we are going to take. Simply by establishing a plan and establishing a process, you sound so much more credible. if you're talking to the CEO or the CFO or whoever about how you're going to achieve these goals, if you say this, then this, which allows for this, which activates this, which empowers and engenders this, they go, not just asking for a pony.
But do they though? Because in my experience, they go, right, we want to get from here to there. First, we're going to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You never get to step 5 without them checking their phone and switching off. And, you talked about anecdotal this, and this is how I feel. That couldn't be more fluffy compared to the metric business case. So here's what it comes down to, James. It sounds like to me we need to balance very hard metrics that the business cares about. We need to paint a very clear story of where we are now and where we're going towards or going to be.
1000%.
And there needs to be a human sort of element of fluffiness. Like, this is all getting a little bit complicated and hard. This is not straightforward.
No,
and
it's not.
And the other thing here is we're talking about going from where we are today to a utopian or positive destination tomorrow. Mm-hmm. In my experience, there's one thing that we haven't covered here. The risk of not doing it. What a future looks like if you don't.
Yes. The carrot and the stick. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a few moving pieces here. And if we don't put them into the right order in the right sort of place, there's a very good chance that we might be confusing more people than we're adding value to here. So
what? How dare you?
Walk me through, let's be super clear, how we put all of these pieces together to be more effective in our role as a TA leader, get the budget resource and buy-in for what we need is the employer brand, without saying employer brand, and deliver impact over time. And we've got the final thing I'll throw into the mix before handing it back to you is leaders typically are impatient, so they want some sort of immediate gratification.
100%.
And they also have very short memories because they're juggling a million things. That's right. So we can't just tell this a very effective story once.
Yep. Okay.
So walk me through where you start, how you keep people engaged, and you remind them and demonstrate the impact is coming, and it's coming in different ways. The very hard business case metric, and to your point, how it feels anecdotally, things are changing.
Yeah. Okay. So you start with that micro story. You want to try to attract that person. You want to try to hire that person. No amount of expensive ads and emails and CRMs is going to get them to you unless they have a reason to open the email, unless they have a reason to talk to you. Then you add in the stick. You say, look, here's our job posting. Here's everybody else's job postings. Look how much better they are. Look at how much better their X, Y, or Z is. So create the fear. Create that, oh, shoot, we're falling behind. You don't overplay that hand. Do not, because then you look like a fear monger and a schmuck and whatever it is. Just give, it's like a pinch of salt. Just say.
And don't throw anyone else under the bus either.
Don't do that. It's not about, it's because we have bad job postings because Bob has crappy job. No, don't do that. You just simply say, look, we've invested our time and efforts in other places and we are starting to fall behind relative to X, Y, Z. Okay. So now you've told the story and they kind of have a picture of, oh, so we want to solve for that person. Great. Then you say, look, the way you solve for that person is to ensure that we are focusing everything on the following metric or the following 2 metrics.
Okay, I like that.
Some will have immediate impact. For example, we can very quickly, and I say very quickly meaning a month, maybe 2, change all of our talking points so that everything is aligned, and that's our kind of core milestone. When we know everything is aligned, every talking point, every social post, every whatever is saying the same stuff, that is base camp for what we're trying to do. Immediately, you will start to see positive outcomes, but let's not focus on that. What we want to focus on is up-leveling the people we're trying to talk to and hearing from hiring managers that we are reaching and engaging a higher quality talent.
So I want to just pause there for a second to just tell you what I've just heard and I think is brilliant. So what you're saying is anecdotally use a specific scenario of a pain point where we can't find the right person in the right role and the impact, the negative impact that's having, and use that to paint the picture of the macro situation the organization is in. I love that because it makes a very broad macro situation come to life very, very quickly.
Yes, it's human.
And it uses a
human-sized.
human-specific example that the leader in front of you cares about.
Yes, exactly.
Love
It's
that.
really easy to say, and I know some people who get away with this and do really well, to walking up to the CEO and say, do you know why people want to work here? And they say no, and you get to start that conversation. There's way too many CEOs who will think they know the answer and say yes.
I was going to say, I've never met a CEO that says no.
You're like, okay, well, it was nice being here. I gotta go. So you start with that story. You start by uncovering their pain point at a human scale, human level that they can feel.
Mm-hmm.
It takes work to find that. I'll give you that. It's not easy. There's a reason why this you don't just do this every single day. Once you've established that base camp, once you've established here's the KPI we're ready to go to, you can say, look, in the future, we're going to hit these other KPIs that this person cares about, this person cares about, this person cares about. But what you have to do, I think the biggest danger is if you show a plan that goes 3 years, has there ever been a plan that existed more than 3 months that actually landed where it was supposed to? I don't believe that's true. From the moon landing to it doesn't matter. No project has actually hit its milestones when everybody thought they would. If you say it's this, then this, then this, and you say we won't focus on phase 2 until we see X and Y and Z in phase 1. That is how we know this is working. And if it doesn't work, we need to change. We should not invest in the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
So I tend to focus on these are phases and each one is contingent on the previous phase succeeding. Then if it doesn't, we don't want to reinvest in something that's not working. That'd be stupid. And it gives us a chance to pivot. And you always want, look, you and I know this, you always want to leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room, just a little bit of hedging room, just because shit happens. And we just got our explicit license there, right there. We just got called for explicit. Shit happens and you can't kind of mitigate all of it. So understand that it happens.
Okay. So I think that's a really good point. And I think that's definitely something people should bear in mind and start to use straight away. And it's interesting what you say about the CEO and what they think they know versus the reality and all the rest of it. However, and this sort of also reminds me of the maturity model episode. Actually, it's like understanding the context and situation we're in. So people should check that out, that episode out, and use that download to pinpoint your exact situation to climatize yourself to your own surroundings. But 100%. Something that universally always works, in my experience, is if you go up to the leader that we're trying to influence, whether it's the CEO or otherwise, and say, hey, I've done some research, I've spoken to some people, and unanimously we believe this place is special because, however, nobody in the external audience, nobody out there knows.
Oh, that's a great one. That is a great trick to play. Hard to lean right up into their ego and then say, gosh, no one knows how wonderful we all are. And when we say we mean you. CEO,
yeah,
CFO,
exactly. Therefore, what should we do about it? Because if people did know that one secret externally, what do you think would happen? We'd start to get great people and all the rest of it.
I love that.
The second thing is unanimously, universally, in any boardroom in the land, no senior leader likes to be told that we are currently operating tactically as an organization. So the strategic approach would be insert your plan, right?
Yeah. That's
Have you seen any other effective tools or mechanisms or positioning to really prick the ears up of leadership?
There are a couple of tricks that you could lean on, like award season, and I have such mixed emotions about awards.
Yeah,
but they can work. They can work.
It does work. It does work. Just like the Glassdoor rating and best places to work and all the rest of it. We could argue or agree vehemently whether they are worth a carrot, but leadership cares about them. Therefore,
it's a lever. It's a lever to get you where you want to go. And I highly endorse using that as a lever. I do not endorse necessarily using it as the baseline of your brand or the foundation of your brand. I can tell you 20 reasons why that's a bad idea. But if it's the thing, and look, here's the deal. We're trying to teach without teaching. It's not easy. And whatever trick you can, it's kind of like trying to get your kid to eat vegetables. If you've got to hide it in the muffin, if you've got to cover it in spaghetti sauce, whatever it takes to get them to eat their vegetables, do it. There's no trick that's too tricky. Do it. Just so long as you don't put yourself in a box where you're trapped. Like that's as far as you can go. Just make it so that they start to see. I know you love that one. And you know what? Never thought of that before. On the fly. Why don't we record live?
I've got to say, it's the perfect analogy, and it really does. It really does get that message out. Like it just, it's like trying to get your leaders to eat vegetables. Yeah, no, I've fucked that up. I mixed it up. But it's like trying to get your kids to eat vegetables. It doesn't matter how, if there's something that works, then do it. You are entirely right. So that's got to go in the book of tricks, right? We've talked a lot about getting the flywheel turning, getting initial buy-in and budget and with the business case and all the rest of it. What's the difference between getting buy-in up front and keeping buy-in throughout?
Yeah. I think this, this is a great way to close out this conversation, because if you just get buy-in up front, you're going to have that feeling of, I did it. It's going to be the Rocky on the stairs kind of moment. I did it. Fantastic. You're patting yourself in the back. You're popping the champagne, all that good stuff. Don't. If you want to get yourself a little candy bar, a little tiny little treat to say, good job, you. Yes, this is not champagne time, because what you need to do is understand that the leader said yes in a moment of excitement. You did your job. You got them to understand and eat the vegetables without knowing that they're eating vegetables. Get them excited about the stuff they cared about. Get them excited about how you can make that change. And the second you walked out the door, they forgot your name. They forgot your project. They forgot your outcomes. They kind of went, whatever. Your job from then on in is to perpetually feed them updates on these are the positive impacts we're seeing. This is when you should expect the next positive outcome. Give them answers now and give them something to anticipate down the road. So long as it's Alibaba and the 1,000 Thieves or 100 Thieves or whatever it is. So long as you're telling half, I don't know how many thieves. There's a lot of thieves. There's a whole lot of thieves.
Yeah.
But that idea of you telling half the story and you say, I'll finish the rest tomorrow so that, Scheherazade couldn't get killed that day. You're always leading them on to anticipate the next thing. That's how you start to build that sense of, okay, this is an ongoing thing. I'm expecting these ideas. I'm expecting these changes. I'm expecting these outcomes. They'll start to talk about it with their leadership. You should do that with as many people as you can. Feed them that sense of, this is what we're doing. This is what we have achieved. This is what we're achieving next. If you want to close it out with, if you've got either needs you want us to serve, like kind of open the door to say, do you want to join the party? Do you want to come on in and be part of this? If you have hires you're looking, if you have hires that are sitting on the ATS and not going anywhere, if you have X or Y or Z, come talk to us. Let's see how we can help. There is a process of perpetually creating allies throughout the process of building and activating and using the employer brand.
So allies is really important. So we've talked a lot about buy-in. 20 odd years of like running an employer brand agency and sort of being in the boardroom and trying to get sign off and trying to get buy-in and all that kind of stuff. I always knew it was going to be a green light and we got buy-in and sign off and everybody was really excited. When I'd managed to convince the people in front of me that it was their idea.
Yes.
It's not my idea that I'm selling and asking for buy-in. I'm going to remind you of the amazing insights and the smart things that you said early on that led us to believe this and gave us the idea for that. And then you helped us refine this such that that's the finished product that you came up with. They're going to look. How important is approaching what you're doing in a collaborative way and reminding leadership of their input?
Yeah, in my work, I always say, if I deliver an employer brand to you and you go, oh, that's a surprise, I have screwed up.
Yeah.
Our job is not to put new outfit on you. Our job is to hold the mirror up and to say, you're a winter, you're not a summer. You look good in this, you don't look so good at this. So focus on this. It sounds simple and stupid, but that's ultimately what we're doing. We're trying to focus everybody's efforts around the things that matter and things that work. So getting that surprise is a bad reaction. It says, oh, wow, I didn't expect to see that. And you have to tell people up front that, because I'm always worried. I'm always worried because, let's be fair, I do hype up the work. I know the value. I know the impact. But I also know sometimes it takes a little time to see it. But I say, look, what I deliver will not be shocking. And in fact, best case scenario, you go, yeah, that sounds about right. That's the win. Don't be disappointed with that, because it is the answer. It is alignment to what we're trying to achieve. Getting the CEO to then sign a big old check next to that is tough, but that's kind of the game. You have to say, but once we have this sense of who we are and what makes us interesting to other people, we turn it on, we activate it, we execute it, yada, 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 we get all those outcomes we want. Yeah.
So I think once again, we've demonstrated that this can be simple, but it's not easy. There are complexities and there are multiple layers, depending on the size of your organization, depending on the culture that you're in, the stakeholders around you, and all the rest of it. So I've really enjoyed this conversation, James.
Same.
And we probably didn't argue quite as much as I was hoping we would. We had our moments. We had a moment. But I tell you this, I'm really glad that we've spent some time, and I've got to hand this to you. You put most of the effort into the download that follows here, but in the download it lays out a really good, robust formula that pretty much any leader could follow and be 80% there. And I'm hoping that the conversation we've had and the nuance of considerations will help people fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So folks, make sure that you download that document.
Brought to you by the Muse.
Thank you, Muse. Because I really do think there's some great contextual value to be had there, and it could just help you and save you weeks and weeks and weeks of getting nowhere. I've seen it so many times.
Absolutely. So thanks everybody for listening. If you have a question, if you have an idea, leave us a voicemail. Go to peoplemba.com and leave us a voicemail. We actually will listen to it. We may actually respond on the air. Is that the way we say this? Okay. Well,
sure, why not?
Yeah, sure, why not? All right, Bryan, thanks. This has been a great conversation. I'm so glad we picked this as a topic. It forced me to kind of think through some of the things I do naturally and made me kind of formalize it a little bit, which is always useful to me. So I appreciate the topic selection and the great questions.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed this one. Till next time.
See you, everybody.
Are you still here? Really? Well, that's a choice. If you've got a thing for making questionable choices, subscribe to the People MBA at peoplemba.com. It's a whole lot better than watching the news.